You are welcome to my YouTube channel. If you enjoy my stories, kindly subscribe and share this video with your friends and family so they can enjoy it too. Thank you. Enjoy your new story.
My name is Maya Sullivan. I am 24 years old and a graduate student. The fluorescent lights in Professor Whitmore's office buzzed like angry wasps as I stood there, hands trembling, staring at the red F scrawled across my thesis. My thesis. The one I had poured 18 months of research, countless sleepless nights, and every ounce of my passion into. The one about educational equity and access for underprivileged students. The one that was supposed to be my ticket to a PhD program and a career changing lives. But Professor Whitmore, I don't understand, I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. You said my research was solid. You approved every chapter. He leaned back in his leather chair, fingers steeple under his chin, looking at me with those cold gray eyes that had always made me uncomfortable. The research is adequate, Miss Sullivan. It's your attitude that's the problem. My attitude. I felt my face flush hot. 2 weeks ago, during a seminar, I had quietly disagreed when he dismissed a scholarship student's question as not worth class time. I had simply said that all students deserved equal consideration. That was it. No raised voice. No disrespect. Just a gentle challenge to his dismissive tone. I'm recommending you repeat the year, he continued, shuffling papers on his desk without looking at me. Perhaps with a more cooperative mindset, you'll succeed next time. The room spun. Repeat the year. That meant losing my scholarship. That meant my mother's sacrifices, working double shifts at the diner to help me, would be for nothing. That meant the end of everything I had worked for since I was a little girl dreaming of becoming a professor myself. I stumbled out of his office, my vision blurred with tears I refused to let fall until I reached the bathroom. Inside a stall, I finally let them come, hot and angry and desperate. My phone buzzed. Mom. I couldn't answer. How could I tell her that her brilliant daughter, her pride and joy, had failed because of attitude? The bathroom door creaked open. I held my breath, trying to muffle my sobs. Honey. You okay in there? It was Professor Adelaide, one of the few faculty members who had always been kind to me. I emerged, wiping my face with rough paper towels. She took one look at me and her expression shifted from concern to something darker. Understanding. Whitmore, she asked quietly. I nodded, unable to speak. She sighed, a sound full of old frustrations. You're not the first, Maya. But I'm sorry to say, he's untouchable. Tenure, connections, published works. The department protects him. But it's not fair, I whispered. No, she agreed, squeezing my shoulder. It's not. But sometimes, fairness takes time to arrive. Don't give up on yourself. Her words were kind, but they felt hollow as I walked across campus that evening, watching other students laugh and study and live their uncomplicated lives. By the time I reached my tiny apartment, I had made a decision. I couldn't afford to repeat the year. I couldn't ask my mother for more money. I would have to find a job and figure out a new path forward. The university job board had exactly one night position available, custodial staff for the humanities building. The same building where I had studied, where I had dreamed, where those dreams had died in Professor Whitmore's office. The irony wasn't lost on me, but pride was a luxury I couldn't afford. I applied that same evening. 3 days later, I received a call from the facilities manager, a gruff man named Mr. Patterson. Can you start Monday? Night shift, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. Pays minimum wage plus a small night differential. Yes, I said immediately. Thank you. That weekend, I told my mother over the phone that I was taking a semester break to work and regroup. She heard the pain in my voice but didn't push. She never did. She just said, "I love you, baby girl. You're going to be okay." Monday night arrived too quickly. I showed up at the facilities office at 9:30, wearing jeans and an old sweatshirt, my hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Mr. Patterson gave me a quick tour, handed me a ring of keys that felt heavy with symbolism, and introduced me to the other night custodian. "This is Robert," he said to me, gesturing to an elderly man who looked to be in his 70s. Robert had gentle brown eyes, silver hair, and the kind of face that seemed to hold 1,000 stories. He wore the same blue custodial uniform I had been given, and he smiled at me with genuine warmth. "Welcome, Maya," he said, his voice soft but steady. "It's nice to have someone new on the team." Robert showed me the ropes that first night with patient kindness. How to properly clean the lecture halls, where the supply closets were, which bathrooms required extra attention. He moved slowly but efficiently, and he talked while he worked, asking me questions about my life in a way that felt genuinely interested rather than nosy. "So you're a student here?" he asked as we emptied trash bins in the third-floor hallway. I corrected, the word bitter on my tongue. "Taking a break." He nodded, not pushing for details. "Education is important. But sometimes the path wins in unexpected directions." There was something in the way he said it, a weight of experience that made me look at him more carefully. Most janitors I had encountered barely spoke to students. They were invisible, part of the background. But Robert spoke like someone who had lived entire lifetimes. Around midnight, we took a break in the small custodial office. I had packed a simple dinner, a peanut butter sandwich and an apple, while Robert pulled out a thermos of soup that smelled incredible. "My wife's recipe," he said, noticing me looking. "She insists I eat well even on night shifts." He paused, then pulled out a second container. "She always packs too much. Would you like some?" "It's vegetable beef." I hesitated, pride warring with hunger and the genuine kindness in his offer. "I don't want to take your food." "You'd be doing me a favor," he said with a gentle smile. "Otherwise I'll eat too much and fall asleep during rounds." The soup was delicious, warming me from the inside out in a way that had nothing to do with temperature. The nights fell into a rhythm over the following weeks. Robert and I worked different sections of the building but always took our midnight break together. He never pried, but somehow, in those quiet hours when the rest of the world slept, I found myself talking to him about things I hadn't told anyone. About my mother working herself to exhaustion. About my dreams of changing the education system from within. About Professor Whitmore's cold dismissal of my work and my future. Robert listened with an intensity that made me feel heard in a way I hadn't felt since my father died when I was 12. He would nod, ask thoughtful questions, and sometimes share small pieces of wisdom that stuck with me. "I've learned," he said one night while we polished the wooden banisters of the main staircase, "that people who need to make others feel small usually feel very small themselves." "That doesn't make it hurt less," I replied. "No," he agreed. "But it does mean their actions tell us more about them than about you." One evening, as I was cleaning the fourth-floor seminar rooms, I heard raised voices. Through a partially open door, I saw Professor Whitmore speaking harshly to one of the scholarship students, a quiet young woman named Beth who I recognized from the library. "Your performance is substandard," he was saying. "Perhaps you're simply not cut out for graduate-level work." Beth's shoulders were hunched, her face turned down. Something in me snapped. I knocked on the doorframe. "Excuse me, Professor. I need to clean this room for a scheduled event tomorrow." It wasn't true, but he didn't know that. He gave me an annoyed look, clearly not recognizing me in my custodial uniform with my hair covered by a bandana, and left with a dismissive wave. Beth looked up at me with grateful, tear-filled eyes. "Thank you." "He's wrong, you know," I told her. "About you not being good enough." After that night, I started noticing things I had been too absorbed in my own studies to see before. The way Professor Whitmore spoke differently to scholarship students versus those from wealthy families. The way he took credit for his graduate assistants' ideas in seminars. The subtle cruelty in his comments that left students deflated. I mentioned these observations to Robert during one of our breaks, expecting him to tell me to mind my own business or that it wasn't my place to judge. Instead, he set down his coffee and looked at me with those thoughtful eyes. What you're describing sounds like a pattern. Patterns tell important stories. But what can anyone do? I asked, frustration bleeding through. Professor Adelaide told me he's untouchable. Untouchable is a word people use when they haven't looked hard enough for the truth, Robert said quietly. Every structure has cracks. Every system has accountability, even if it's hidden. His words stayed with me. That weekend, during my day off, I couldn't stop thinking about Beth and the other students who might be suffering under Whitmore's vindictive teaching. I thought about my own failed thesis, sitting in a box under my bed like a corpse. On Monday night, Robert noticed my distraction. You're troubled, he observed as we restocked paper towels in the bathroom dispensers. I keep thinking I should do something, I admitted. About Professor Whitmore. But I don't know what, and even if I did, who would believe me? I'm the student he failed. It would just look like revenge. Robert nodded slowly. Truth doesn't always reveal itself quickly. Sometimes it needs time and the right circumstances to come to light. But that doesn't mean we stop looking for it. 3 weeks into my custodial job, something happened that changed everything. I was cleaning Professor Whitmore's office, a task I had been dreading but couldn't avoid. He always left by 8 p.m., and I had the master key. My hands shook slightly as I unlocked his door, memories of that awful day flooding back. The office looked the same. Leather chair. Mahogany desk. Walls lined with books and framed certificates boasting of his accomplishments. I started with the trash bin, trying not to look at the desk where my dreams had been crushed. But as I emptied the bin, a folder fell out, partially hidden under crumpled papers. It was labeled with a student's name, Marcus Bennett. Curious, I opened it. Inside were 2 versions of the same thesis chapter. One was clearly Marcus's work, his name on the header. The other was almost identical, but the name had been changed to Professor Whitmore, and the conclusion reworded slightly. My heart began to pound. This was plagiarism. Whitmore was stealing his students' work. I quickly took photos of the pages with my phone, my hands trembling. Then I kept searching. In the recycling bin, I found printed emails. One caught my eye immediately. It was from the International Education Research Committee, dated 2 months ago, addressed to me. Dear Miss Sullivan, we are pleased to inform you that your thesis, Bridging the Gap, Educational Equity in Modern Academia, has been selected as the winner of our annual Graduate Research Award. The email went on to detail a $5,000 prize, an invitation to present at their conference, and publication in their prestigious journal. My vision blurred. This email had been sent to Professor Whitmore as my thesis advisor for forwarding to me. He had never forwarded it. He had hidden it. I stood in that office, my whole body shaking, reading and rereading the email. My thesis had won an international award. The thesis he had failed me for. The thesis he had said showed attitude problems and substandard research. Why would he hide this? The answer came quickly. If my thesis was recognized internationally, it would expose his failing grade as the vindictive act it was. It would raise questions. It might even cost him his reputation. I took photos of everything. The emails. The plagiarized work. Other documents I found that showed a pattern of grade manipulation, students mysteriously failing after questioning his methods or refusing to give him full credit for their research. Then I carefully put everything back exactly as I had found it and finished cleaning the office, my mind racing. In the custodial office, Robert took one look at my face and set down his mop. What happened? I showed him the photos. He studied them carefully, his expression growing more serious with each image. When he finished, he was quiet for a long moment. This is significant evidence, he finally said. But you're right about one thing. Coming forward yourself might be dismissed as retaliation. So what do I do? I asked, desperation creeping into my voice. I can't let him keep doing this to other students. I can't let him steal people's work and destroy their futures. Robert looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Sometimes, Maya, the right thing to do requires patience and strategy. May I make a suggestion? Please, I said. Document everything you can, but don't confront him yet. And trust that sometimes, justice has eyes in unexpected places. Over the next 2 weeks, I became a detective in the night. While cleaning offices, I photographed everything relevant I found. More plagiarized work. More intercepted emails. Grade sheets showing how Whitmore systematically marked down students who challenged him or came from underprivileged backgrounds. I shared everything with Robert, who listened carefully and asked insightful questions that helped me see patterns I had missed. He never told me what to do, but his guidance helped me think more clearly. Have you considered, he asked one night, that there might be others who have noticed these patterns? Faculty members, administrators, perhaps even board members who have seen concerning signs but lacked concrete evidence. Professor Adelaide hinted at that, I remembered. She said I wasn't the first student to have problems with him. Robert nodded thoughtfully. Evidence has a way of finding the right people when the time is right. I didn't fully understand what he meant, but I trusted him. There was something about Robert that made me feel safe, like he was more than just a kind elderly janitor. Sometimes I would catch him looking at the university buildings with an expression of deep familiarity, almost ownership. Sometimes he would mention details about the school's history that seemed oddly specific for a custodial worker. One night, I asked him how long he had worked at the university. On and off for many years, he said with a small smile. I was here when these buildings were new. Watched the place grow from a small college to this. He gestured at the sprawling campus visible through the window. You must have seen a lot of changes, I said. Changes, yes. But some things stay the same. The good educators and the bad ones. The students who care and those who don't. The politics and the power games. His voice carried a weight of experience that made me wonder about his story. December arrived with the first snow, covering the campus in white that made everything look clean and new, even though underneath, the problems remained. I had been working as a custodian for 2 months, and in that time, I had watched my savings slowly stabilize while my dreams seemed further away than ever. One particularly cold night, around 2 a.m., I was cleaning the administrative hallway when I noticed Robert wasn't in his usual section. I found him in the main lobby, standing before a large portrait I had passed 100 times without really looking at. It showed a younger man in his 40s, serious-faced, with kind eyes, at what looked like a groundbreaking ceremony. The founder, Robert said quietly, noticing me. Built this place from nothing. Wanted it to be a place where anyone, regardless of background, could get a quality education. I looked at the portrait more closely. There was something familiar about the man's eyes, something that tugged at my memory. Do you think he'd be happy with what this place has become? I asked. Robert was quiet for a long moment. I think he'd be disappointed by people like Whitmore. But I think he'd be proud of people like you. People who care about doing right even when it's hard. The next week, something strange happened. I received an email to my student account, one I rarely checked anymore. It was from the university's board of trustees, summoning me to appear before them at an emergency meeting scheduled for the following Monday at 9 a.m. My blood ran cold. This had to be about the evidence I had been collecting. Someone must have seen me in Whitmore's office. I was going to be expelled, possibly arrested for theft or trespassing or something. My mother would be devastated. I barely slept that weekend. I kept rereading the email, trying to understand what it meant. Your presence is required at an emergency Board of Trustees meeting regarding matters of academic integrity and student welfare. That could mean anything. That could mean everything. Monday morning, I dressed in the only professional outfit I owned, a simple navy dress my mother had bought me for my thesis defense that never happened. My hands shook as I applied minimal makeup and pulled my hair into a neat bun. The Board of Trustees met in the oldest building on campus, a historic stone structure that intimidated me even on good days. I arrived 15 minutes early and sat in the waiting area, my heart pounding so hard I felt dizzy. At exactly 9 a.m., a secretary led me into a large conference room. Around a long mahogany table sat 12 people in expensive suits. At the head of the table was an empty chair. Professor Whitmore was there too, looking confused and annoyed. Professor Adelaide was present, along with several other faculty members I recognized. Beth, the student I had helped that night, was there too, looking as terrified as I felt. "Please, sit," said a stern woman I recognized as the university president. I took a seat, my legs feeling weak. The door opened again. Mr. Patterson, the facilities manager, entered. And behind him walked Robert. But Robert wasn't wearing his custodial uniform. He wore an expensive charcoal suit, his silver hair neatly combed, and he carried himself with an authority that transformed him completely. He took the seat at the head of the table, and every person in that room straightened slightly, showing a respect I had never seen them show anyone. "Thank you all for coming," Robert said, his gentle voice now carrying the weight of command. "I apologize for the unusual circumstances, but this matter requires immediate attention." I stared at Robert, my mind refusing to process what I was seeing. Professor Whitmore had gone pale. The university president looked uncomfortable but respectful. Professor Adelaide had a slight smile playing at her lips. "For those who don't know," Robert continued, looking directly at me with those same kind eyes, "my full name is Robert Chen. I founded this university 43 years ago. I serve as the chairman of the Board of Trustees, though I prefer to keep a low profile these days." Robert Chen. The founder. The man in the portrait. I had been sharing midnight soup and conversation with the billionaire philanthropist who built this entire institution. My face must have shown my shock because Robert's expression softened. "I'm sorry for the deception, Maya. But I learned long ago that you see the truth of a place only when people don't know who you're watching. I work one night a week as a custodian to stay connected to what really happens in these buildings." "This is absurd," Professor Whitmore sputtered. "What is this student even doing here? She failed my course due to academic deficiencies and attitude problems. Is this meeting about her complaint? Because I can assure you." "This meeting," Robert interrupted quietly, his voice cutting through Whitmore's bluster like a knife, "is about you, Professor Whitmore. And it's about a pattern of misconduct that has gone unchecked for far too long." He nodded to the university's legal counsel, a sharp-eyed woman who opened a thick folder. What followed was the most surreal hour of my life. The legal counsel presented evidence, some of it from documents I had photographed, but much more that had apparently been compiled over months by investigators Robert had hired. Grade manipulation. Plagiarism of student work. Harassment. Discrimination against scholarship students. Intercepted correspondence. All of it laid out in damning detail. Professor Whitmore's face went from pale to red to purple as his career unraveled before our eyes. "These are lies," Whitmore insisted, but his voice had lost its confidence. "This student, she's vengeful because I failed her substandard thesis. She's fabricated evidence. The evidence comes from multiple sources," the legal counsel said calmly. "Including several students who were afraid to come forward before, and faculty members who had noticed concerning patterns but lacked the documentation to act." Professor Adelaide spoke up then, her voice strong. I've witnessed Professor Whitmore's treatment of scholarship students for 5 years. I've heard him mock their backgrounds, dismiss their contributions, and grade them unfairly. I didn't have proof until now, but I can testify to the pattern. Beth raised a trembling hand. He told me I was too stupid for graduate school. He said people like me, meaning poor people, should stick to community college. When I tried to report it, I was told there was no evidence. 3 other students were brought in, each telling similar stories. Each describing how Whitmore had crushed their confidence, stolen their ideas, or failed them for daring to disagree with him. The legal counsel continued. Perhaps most concerning is the case of Miss Sullivan's thesis. She pulled out a document I recognized as my own work. This thesis was submitted to the International Education Research Committee without Professor Whitmore's knowledge, as per the committee's policy of blind review. It won their prestigious annual award. Gasps around the room. Professor Whitmore's face was now completely white. Professor Whitmore received notification of this award as Miss Sullivan's thesis advisor, the legal counsel continued. He was instructed to forward it to her. He never did. Instead, we have evidence that he intercepted the letter and has been preparing to submit a plagiarized version of Miss Sullivan's work under his own name to another journal. The room exploded in angry whispers. I sat frozen, watching my former professor's world collapse. Furthermore, Robert's voice cut through the noise. We've identified 6 other instances over the past 3 years where Professor Whitmore plagiarized his graduate students' work, presenting their research as his own at conferences and in publications. We have testimony from former students who were too intimidated to come forward at the time. Professor Whitmore tried one more defense. You can't prove any of this was intentional. Administrative errors, miscommunications. We can prove it, Robert said, his gentle tone now edged with steel. We have your emails to colleagues where you explicitly discuss repurposing student work. We have your internal notes showing intentional grade manipulation based on students' economic backgrounds. We have recorded conversations where you disparaged scholarship students in ways that violate both university policy and basic human decency. The university president spoke up, her voice tight with barely controlled anger. Professor Whitmore, your tenure is hereby suspended pending a full investigation. You're to clear your office under supervision and are banned from campus effective immediately. Criminal charges for academic fraud and theft of intellectual property are being considered by the district attorney's office. Whitmore stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. He looked around the room like a trapped animal, his eyes finally landing on me with pure hatred. This is her fault. That uppity little scholarship girl who couldn't just accept her place. That's enough, Robert said, his voice still quiet but with such command that Whitmore actually stopped mid-sentence. Security will escort you out. Your attorney has been notified. You're done here. 2 security officers I hadn't noticed appeared and led a now silent Professor Whitmore from the room. The door closed behind him with a finality that echoed. The room remained silent for a long moment after Whitmore left. I felt like I was floating outside my body, watching this happen to someone else. This couldn't be real. 2 months ago, I had been devastated, my dreams destroyed. Now my tormentor was being escorted off campus in disgrace. Robert turned to me, his expression gentle again. Maya, I owe you an apology. I knew within the first week of working with you that something was wrong with your situation. When you mentioned Professor Whitmore, I started looking into his background. What I found concerned me enough to hire investigators. You did all this, because of our conversations. I managed to ask. I did this because you reminded me why I built this university in the first place, Robert replied. I created this institution to give brilliant, passionate students like you a chance to learn and grow and change the world. Professor Whitmore perverted that mission. He had to be stopped. The university president cleared her throat. Miss Sullivan, on behalf of the university, I want to apologize for the injustice you suffered. Your thesis will be reviewed by an independent committee, though given its international award, I suspect their findings will be favorable. More than favorable, the legal counsel interjected. She pulled out another document. The International Education Research Committee has invited Miss Sullivan to present her thesis at their spring conference in Geneva. They're also publishing it in their journal and including a $5,000 research prize. $5,000. Geneva. Publication. The room spun again, but this time with joy instead of fear. Professor Adelaide smiled at me, genuine warmth in her expression. I always knew your work was excellent, Maya. I'm sorry I couldn't do more to help before. There's one more thing, Robert said. He pulled out a formal letter with the university seal. Miss Sullivan, the Board of Trustees would like to offer you a full scholarship for a PhD program here, with a generous stipend for living expenses. We would also like to invite you to join a new initiative we're launching. Robert slid the letter across the table to me. My hands shook as I picked it up and read it. Full tuition. A monthly stipend of $2,000 for living expenses. A research assistant position. It was more than I had ever dreamed of. The new initiative, Robert continued, is called the Educational Equity Task Force. We're creating a committee to review our admissions, financial aid, and academic policies to ensure we're truly serving students from all backgrounds. We need someone with first-hand experience and genuine passion for the issue. Someone like you. You want me to help design policy. I stammered. I want you to help reshape this university to match the vision I had when I founded it, Robert said. A place where talent and determination matter more than privilege. A place where professors inspire rather than intimidate. You've lived through what doesn't work. Help us build what does. The university president nodded. You would work directly with administration and the board. Your voice would have real weight in decisions that affect students' lives. I thought about Beth and the other students who had suffered. I thought about my mother working double shifts so I could chase this dream. I thought about all the brilliant kids from backgrounds like mine who never got a fair chance. Yes, I said, my voice stronger than I expected. Yes, I want to do this. The room broke into smiles. Professor Adelaide actually clapped. Robert's eyes crinkled with approval. There's one more piece of business, Robert said, his tone becoming more serious. Your original thesis defense. It was supposed to happen 3 months ago before Professor Whitmore failed you. We'd like to schedule a proper defense with a fair committee within the next 2 weeks. Given the international award, it's a formality, but you deserve the chance to present your work with dignity. The meeting adjourned shortly after, but Robert asked me to stay. When the room emptied, it was just the two of us and the portrait of a younger Robert Chen on the wall behind him. I'm sorry I deceived you, he said quietly. But I hope you understand why. I think I do, I said, still processing everything. You wanted to see the truth. If everyone had known who you were, they would have performed for me, he finished. Shown me what they thought I wanted to see. But working as Robert the janitor, I saw how staff treated the help. I saw which professors stayed late genuinely caring about students and which ones left at 5 sharp. I saw who was kind when no one important was watching. That's why you shared your lunch with me, I realized. You were testing me. I was getting to know you, he corrected gently. And I saw someone who treated a janitor with the same respect she would show a professor. Someone who defended other people even when she was hurting. Someone who shared her last apple with an old man she barely knew. That told me everything I needed to know about your character. I felt tears starting and blinked them back. I thought my life was over. That day he failed me, I thought everything I had worked for was gone. I know, Robert said softly. I've seen that look in students' eyes before. It's why I started doing this custodial work years ago. I needed to see the cracks in the system I built. And whenever I found those cracks, I tried to fix them. How many other professors have you? I trailed off. Let's just say Professor Whitmore isn't the first person whose behavior I've investigated. But he was one of the worst. Robert's expression darkened slightly. The plagiarism, the discrimination, the systematic cruelty. He had to go. Robert stood and walked to the window overlooking the campus. Snow was falling gently, covering the paths where thousands of students would walk tomorrow, each carrying their own dreams and struggles. When I built this place, he said, I was young and idealistic. I truly believed education could change the world. That if we just gave people knowledge and opportunity, they would make everything better. You don't believe that anymore? I asked. I believe it more than ever, he turned back to me. But I also learned that institutions are only as good as the people who run them. That policies don't matter if the humans enforcing them are cruel or biased or corrupt. That's why your voice on this task force matters so much, Maya. You've seen both sides now. The promise and the failure. He returned to his seat, and for a moment, he looked every one of his 70-something years. Tired but determined. I won't lie to you, he continued. Changing an institution this size is slow work. There will be resistance. Some faculty will resent a former student telling them how to teach. Some administrators will fight to protect their territories. But I believe you have the strength and the wisdom to push through. I'm just 24 years old, I said. Why would anyone listen to me? Because you're right, Robert said simply. And because you've earned it. Not just through your excellent research, but through your character. You could have used the evidence you found to destroy Whitmore publicly, to get revenge. Instead, you came to me, someone you thought was just a janitor, and asked for advice. You wanted to do the right thing, not just the satisfying thing. That hit me hard because he was right. There had been moments when I wanted to print out everything and plaster it all over campus. Moments when I wanted Whitmore to suffer the way he had made me suffer. But something had held me back. There's something I need to tell you, Robert said, his expression becoming more serious. Something I haven't shared with the others yet. He pulled out his phone and showed me an email dated from last week. It was from Whitmore to a colleague at another university. You see, Whitmore had written, I've found the perfect solution. Sullivan's thesis on educational equity is brilliant, far better than anything I could produce. I'm submitting it to the Journal of Educational Reform under my name. She failed my course and left the university, so she'll never know. Even if she somehow found out, who would believe a failed graduate student over a tenured professor? The casualness of it, the calculated theft and the assumption he would get away with it, made me feel sick. He was planning this from the beginning, I whispered. Yes, Robert confirmed. The failed grade wasn't just punishment for questioning him. It was strategic. He wanted you discredited and gone so he could steal your work without risk. I thought about all the hours I had spent on that thesis. All the interviews with struggling students, the data analysis, the late nights refining my arguments. He had planned to take all of it and claim it as his own. I'm glad he's gone, I said, surprised by the venom in my own voice. So am I, Robert agreed. And I'm glad you'll be here to make sure no one like him takes root again. Over the next 2 weeks, my life transformed so completely I sometimes thought I was dreaming. My thesis defense was scheduled with a committee of respected professors who actually read my work and engaged with my ideas. They passed me with distinction. My grade was officially changed from an F to an A+, and I graduated with highest honors. The International Education Research Committee confirmed my invitation to Geneva. The university released a statement about Professor Whitmore's dismissal that carefully avoided specific details but made clear he had been terminated for serious misconduct. The night before I left for the Geneva conference, I found Robert in the custodial office. He still worked his 1 night per week, he told me, though now I understood it wasn't about the work itself but about staying connected. "I wanted to thank you," I said, setting down a small wrapped package on the desk. "For everything." He opened it carefully. Inside was a framed photo I had found in the university archives, showing him breaking ground on the very first building. Young, hopeful, ready to change the world. "I thought you might like to remember why you started," I said. His eyes grew misty. "Thank you, Maya. This means more than you know." We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, drinking the terrible break room coffee that tasted like memories now. "Can I ask you something?" I said. "Why do you still do this? You could just review reports and make decisions from an office. Why spend nights pushing a mop?" Robert smiled. "Because reports lie. Numbers can be manipulated. But when I'm here at 2 a.m. and I see a professor still in their office genuinely helping a struggling student, that tells me something true. When I see how the staff treats each other when they think no one's watching, that tells me about our culture. When I meet someone like you, someone who treats everyone with respect regardless of their position, that gives me hope." "You're checking up on your investment," I realized. "I'm tending my garden," he corrected. "I planted seeds 40 years ago. Some grew into beautiful things. Some became weeds that needed pulling. You don't just plant a garden and walk away. You maintain it." We talked for another hour about my plans for the task force, about the changes I hoped to make, about the students I wanted to help. Robert listened with that same patient attention he had shown me from the very beginning, when I was just a heartbroken girl in a janitor's uniform and he was the invisible man with the mop. "One more thing," he said as I was leaving. "That thesis of yours. The one about educational equity. I read it, obviously, during the investigation. It's brilliant work, Maya. But more than that, it's necessary work. Don't let the academic world polish away your passion. Stay angry about injustice, even as you learn to channel that anger into productive change." "I will," I promised. Geneva was magical. Standing before hundreds of education professionals from around the world, presenting my thesis on the stage of an international conference, felt surreal. My mother flew in to watch, tears streaming down her face as I delivered my speech. The $5,000 prize meant I could pay her back for some of the sacrifices she had made. But more than the money or the prestige, what mattered was the conversations afterward. Educators from developing countries talking about implementing my ideas. Policymakers interested in my research on scholarship retention. A publisher asking if I wanted to expand my thesis into a book. I thought about Professor Whitmore, who had tried to steal this moment. Who had wanted his name on this stage instead of mine. And I felt something surprising, not anger, but pity. He had spent his career taking from others instead of building something of his own. What a small, sad way to live. When I returned home, the spring semester was starting. I began my PhD program and my work with the Educational Equity Task Force. The task force met weekly, and I quickly learned Robert was right about the resistance. Some faculty members resented my input. Some administrators saw me as a troublemaker. But we made progress. We revised the scholarship application to remove biases. We created a reporting system for students who experienced discrimination, with protections against retaliation. We started mandatory training on implicit bias for all faculty. Beth, the student I had helped that night in the hallway, became my first mentor. She was thriving now, her confidence slowly returning. We met for coffee every week, and I shared what I wished someone had shared with me, that your worth isn't determined by one person's opinion, especially not a cruel person's opinion. 6 months after that board meeting, I got a call from the district attorney's office. Professor Whitmore was being charged with academic fraud, theft of intellectual property, and civil rights violations. They wanted me to testify. The trial was brief but intense. Whitmore's lawyer tried to paint me as vindictive, but the evidence was overwhelming. 6 students testified about plagiarism. 12 more about grade manipulation and discrimination. The university's investigation had uncovered even more misconduct than Robert's initial inquiry. When it was my turn on the stand, I told my story clearly and calmly. How he had failed me not for my work but for my attitude. How I had discovered his theft of my award. How he had planned to publish my thesis under his name. Whitmore never looked at me during my testimony. He stared at the table, his former arrogance completely gone. He was found guilty on multiple counts. The judge sentenced him to 3 years in prison, plus restitution to all the students whose work he had stolen. His academic credentials were revoked. His published works were being reviewed for additional plagiarism. I should have felt triumph, but mostly I just felt tired. Justice had been served, but it couldn't give me back those months of pain and doubt. It couldn't erase the damage he had done to so many students over the years. That evening, Robert invited me to dinner at his home, a beautiful craftsman house filled with books and memories. His wife, Helen, was as warm and welcoming as her soup had been. "You did well today," Robert said as we ate. "I know it wasn't easy." "It was necessary," I replied. "But I keep thinking about all the students before me. The ones who suffered because no one stopped him sooner." "You can't change the past," Helen said gently. "But you're changing the future. That matters." A year after that awful day in Whitmore's office, the university held a ceremony I never could have imagined. They were renaming the scholarship program I had been part of. It was now called the Maya Sullivan Educational Equity Scholarship, specifically designed for students from underprivileged backgrounds who showed academic excellence and a passion for social justice. The ceremony was held in the main auditorium, packed with students, faculty, and press. Robert gave a speech about the importance of equity in education, about how talent exists everywhere but opportunity doesn't. Then he called me to the stage. "A year ago," he said, "Maya Sullivan was failed by a professor who valued obedience over excellence. Who saw her background as a weakness rather than a source of strength. Who tried to steal her work and crush her dreams." The audience was silent, hanging on every word. But Maya didn't let that failure define her. She took a job as a night custodian, worked with dignity, and treated everyone around her with respect and kindness. In doing so, she not only revealed the corruption that needed to be addressed but also demonstrated the values this university should embody. He turned to me. "Maya, your thesis argued that educational equity requires more than policy changes. It requires cultural transformation. You're living proof of that argument. This scholarship in your name will help other students who were facing similar barriers. But more than that, your work on our task force is transforming how this institution operates." The audience applauded. I stepped to the microphone, my heart pounding but my voice steady. "When I was cleaning these halls at 2 in the morning, I thought my dreams were over. I thought one person's cruelty had ended everything I'd worked for. But I learned something important during those months. I looked out at the sea of faces, seeing Beth in the 3rd row, seeing Professor Adelaide, seeing my mother dabbing at her eyes. I learned that your worth doesn't come from the grades you're given or the approval you receive," I continued. "It comes from who you are when things are hardest. From how you treat people when you have no power. From whether you keep your integrity when it would be easier to become bitter." I glanced at Robert, who was watching with that same gentle attention he had shown me in the custodial office. I also learned that help comes from unexpected places. That justice, when it finally arrives, often has been working behind the scenes longer than you know. And that one person who believes in you can change everything. I paused, letting my words settle. This scholarship represents more than financial aid. It represents the promise that your background doesn't determine your future. That struggling doesn't mean failing. That this university will fight for you, not against you. The applause was thunderous. Afterward, 12 students came up to me, each holding acceptance letters for the Maya Sullivan Scholarship. I hugged each one, remembering how desperately I had needed someone to believe in me. Later that evening, at a small reception, the university president announced one more surprise. They were creating a permanent position, Director of Educational Equity and Student Advocacy. They offered it to me, effective immediately upon completion of my PhD. "We need your voice here permanently," the president said. "We need someone who understands both the theory and the lived experience. Someone students trust and who won't back down from difficult conversations." I accepted, of course. How could I not? As the reception wound down, I found Robert standing alone by a window, looking out at the campus lights. "You knew," I said, joining him. "When we were having soup in that break room at midnight. You already knew you were going to help me." "I knew I was going to do something," he admitted. "But you're the one who made it possible, Maya. If you had been vindictive or had treated me differently once you found those documents, things might have gone very differently. Character matters." 2 years have passed since that awful day in Professor Whitmore's office. 2 years since my world collapsed and then rebuilt itself into something I never could have imagined. I'm now in my second year of the PhD program, my dissertation expanding on my original thesis work. I've been serving as Director of Educational Equity for 6 months, and we've made real changes. Scholarship retention rates are up 30%. Student satisfaction scores have improved. We've hired more diverse faculty and implemented strict oversight on grade appeals. Beth graduated last month with honors. She's starting a master's program in education, planning to become a high school counselor in underprivileged communities. 3 other students I've mentored have similar success stories. The Maya Sullivan Scholarship has helped 48 students so far. I know every one of their names. I meet with them regularly, making sure they have what they need, making sure no one treats them the way Whitmore treated me. My thesis was published as a book last fall. Bridging the Gap, Educational Equity in Modern Academia. It's being used in education courses at universities around the country. Sometimes I still can't believe my name is on the cover of something so many people are reading. Professor Whitmore is serving his sentence in a minimum security facility. I don't think about him much anymore. He's not worth the mental space. Last week, I was working late in my office when I saw a familiar figure through the window. Robert, in his custodial uniform, emptying trash bins in the administrative wing. Still tending his garden at 75 years old. I went out to say hello. He smiled when he saw me. "Burning the midnight oil?" he asked. "Working on a proposal for expanded mental health services," I replied. "Too many students struggling in silence." He nodded approvingly. "That's good work." We walked together through the quiet hallways, and it felt like coming full circle. I, in professional clothes now, him still in his uniform, but the same respect and genuine care between us. "I've been thinking," I said, "about starting a program where administrators and faculty have to work alongside facility staff for a week. See the campus from a different perspective." Robert laughed, a sound full of warmth. "Now that's an idea. Empathy through experience. I like it." We reached the custodial office, and he pulled out his thermos. "Helen made soup. Want some?" I did. We sat in that same break room where I had cried and dreamed and slowly rebuilt my confidence, and we talked about the future. About the students who would come after me. About the garden that needed tending. Later, walking to my car through the snowy campus, I thought about everything that had happened. How close I had come to giving up. How one man's cruelty had nearly destroyed me, and how another man's quiet kindness had saved me. But more than that, I thought about what I had learned, that justice takes time but it comes. That kindness is never wasted, even when it seems invisible. That your lowest moment can be the beginning of your greatest transformation if you hold on to who you are. My phone buzzed. A text from Beth. Got accepted to the counseling program. Can't wait to tell you about it. I smiled, typed back congratulations, and drove home thinking about how truth and kindness really do create ripples that return as waves. And how the most powerful thing we can do is stay humble enough to receive them when they come. Sometimes the people who seem smallest turn out to be giants. Sometimes justice has eyes in unexpected places. And sometimes, when everything falls apart, it's just making room for something better to be built. That's what I tell the scholarship students when they're struggling. That's what I'll keep telling every student who walks through my office door feeling defeated. Your story isn't over. The person who tried to end it doesn't get to write your ending. You do. Thank you for listening to my story. Kindly subscribe to this YouTube channel, Randy Revenges, for more inspiring stories, like and share.